Hey, what's up, y'all? This is William, the Permaculture Consultant, and today we're going to be talking about how to maximize the production on your pasture. I'm going to show you guys some traditional versions of how people, traditionally use pasture. That was redundant, but you get the point. I'm going to show you Silvopasture, which is a step up from that, and then I'm going to show you the enhanced Silvopasture version at the end. So stick around. Also, me, Emily, and the baby will be at the Homestead Jubilee in North Carolina. All the details are down below. If you need permaculture consultations, then hit up the email down below. Also, if you have a permaculture Q&A question that you want answered on video, then leave the comment down below with the hashtag permaculture Q&A at the beginning of it. Let's get started. Alrighty, so over here you have your traditional use of pasture. Basically just fence in the whole thing, throw cows on there, move them every once in a while, call it good. Maybe divide the pasture into a few different paddocks, maybe 2 or 3, and then call it good, and then just move them every couple of months or so. That's the traditional use of your pasture. Now, what are you getting out of that pasture? Only the animal that you're grazing in that pasture. So in this case, they're getting beef. That's what they're growing out in this pasture, and that's their only yield from this entire pasture is just beef. Now, they do have some trees along the side of their fence line. I don't know if it's intentional or if it's more like it's just difficult to maintain trees on a fence line. I'm not entirely sure, but they are getting a little bit of shade from those trees. Some of those trees are, dropping acorns. Some of them are oaks. But the downside of that is that they have cows. They aren't the most efficient transfer of food to our food whenever they're eating acorns. So it's kind of wasted to an extent on the cows. It is something, but it's not much. It's not as good as it could be. Now, what are the inputs on a field like this? Well, you have to provide shade. You should provide shade. Now, they have very minimal shade provided in this area, so the areas that they do provide shade are super heavily compacted because all of the animals accumulate at the same location every single day, because that's the only shade available, so that's where they keep on going. Also, this is the same field that was crop dusted earlier, so I'm assuming that they're having some weed pressure. Some varieties are growing out in that field that they don't want, so they went out and crop dusted. That's an issue. Their pasture is getting worse and worse and worse over every season. Now, there are ways to make the pasture better just through proper rotational grazing and stuff, but it's still not the maximum production or the maximum yield that you could be hitting on your pasture. Let's move on to the traditional pasture. Everybody knows this part, the traditional pasture. Everybody knows this part. Everybody's familiar with this. Everything else from here on out is going to be maybe new to you, or it's going to add to maybe what you already know. So let's move on to the traditional silvopasture. So over here, past this new pond that I dug, we're getting into the silvopasture area. Now, you notice that there are still trees, but the canopy on these trees are just barely coming in contact, which is allowing enough sunlight to come through, especially in this Texas heat. It's allowing enough of the sunlight to come through and grow grass. Now, this is the first season. I cut most of these trees out earlier this winter. I think it was like January, February, something like that, when it was nice and cool outside here in Texas. That's when I cut a lot of these guys down. So the forage growth is mostly weeds right now. I didn't go back and seed anything or anything like that, but what I can do is graze animals over the top of it. Eventually the proper seed bank will come through, or I can throw down seed right after the pigs that I have up in the enhanced silvopasture. I can throw down seed behind them. There's a bunch of different options. That's not really the point of the video. The point is that by introducing trees, properly spaced out trees like you can see here, I'm able to, Joel Salatin talks about this, I'm able to put an extra pound, if I'm providing shade for my cows, that's not creating compaction layers in the soil, so I'm still benefiting the soil, and I'm properly rotating them through this silvopasture, then I'm able to put an extra pound on my cow per day through the summer, which is a big deal. If you have, let's say, 90 days through the summer, that's 90 extra pounds that you're able to put on your beef, for example, that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise if you didn't give them adequate shade. Also, one of the big things that I forgot to mention is that you don't have to stick to just beef. You can rotate any animal that you're wanting to graze through here through a silvopasture type setup. Sorry, I was just checking this mushroom. I saw it hanging off this tree. Caught my eye out of the corner over there. But anyway, you don't have to stick to just beef. You can go to goats, you can do sheep. I don't recommend goats because they're a pain in the butt. You can do sheep, you can do pigs, you can do chickens, you can do all kinds of things. You can graze all kinds of things, even in the regular pasture. That's another way you could increase production in your regular pasture, is have your cows go through, then have your sheep go through, then have your chickens go through, and then if you want to, you could have your pigs go through. That's 4 different animals, 4 different products, 4 different yields that you could get out of the same piece of land. Now I've introduced shade. Now my animals are able to put on weight even better just because I've introduced proper, adequate shade. Some of these trees are oaks. Some of them are could be chestnuts. Some of them could be walnuts. All kinds of nut varieties. Some of them could be native fruit-bearing varieties, such as like persimmons or pawpaws, or let's say you're somewhere else, blueberries, apples, all kinds of varieties. Let's say you have native fruit varieties. Those could be your overstory, be part of your barely touching canopy, and provide shade as well as food to the animals that you're grazing through your silvopasture. You can also rotate pigs through here, which would really put in, they are a very good conversion from feed to food for us. And then whenever they get acorns, like traditionally the South was known for having the best tasting pork because they were finished on sweet potatoes and acorns. And that's a lot of what's in this forest. This is known as a piney oak forest. Heavy on the oak, especially on this property. I think I only have 1 or 2 pines that I've been able to locate on this 5 acres out there. And one of the pines is right there. You can barely see it. But yeah, so this is silvopasture. My animals might be getting a little bit extra feed from the trees that drop the food. They're definitely benefiting from the sun. There's less of a tax played on the soil because the trees are providing protection during that summer heat and also protection during the winter. Everything is more chilled out and mild here in the silvopasture. Well, that's a little freaky. There's definitely something back in there. I saw something just move. Hold on, I'm gonna flip the camera around. It was just like right in there. I heard barking. There's barking off to that side. But then I looked back there because I heard like something. I don't know. I was in the middle of talking. My microphone's on and I don't know. I'm not even sure I'm gonna include this in the video. But there was definitely something, like as soon as I looked back there, it just like, huh. All right. You know, you get that like, all of a sudden uneasy feeling. Yeah, that's just what happened. Huh, I don't know. Anyways, we are done with that part of the silvopasture. Yeah, I don't know, something's going on back there. I'm not entirely sure. But we're done with that part of the silvopasture anyways. Highly beneficial, you should do it. Yeah, so anyway, we're gonna continue on with the enhanced version of the silvopasture. So we're walking back up to the front of the property where I have the pigs rotating right now. Now this area is the enhanced permaculture swale silvopasture grazing in between setup. It's not a very efficient name, but it's a very, very efficient use of your property. This is like the maximum production that I know of that you can do on a single piece of land. And that's rotating your animals in between swales that have fruit trees or a fruit tree orchard or a permaculture orchard planted on the mound side of those swales. Let's go through everything that this design is harvesting and everything and every yield that you can get from a design like this. So starting up here at the top of the property, this is the highest point in this property right here, and also our top swale. You can see it down in here. Every time it rains, enough to hit runoff, it flows down into this ditch right in here. I have trees planted on the mound of the swale. The water is passively harvested in this ditch. It's forced to soak back into the landscape. It's retaining water in the landscape, and these trees also have access to it, especially during drought events, this is Texas. We get a drought event every single doggone year. It's either droughts or floods. Now this particular tree pattern is the NAP pattern. Nitrogen, apple, pear. Nitrogen, apple, pear, over and over again. Nitrogen stands for any nitrogen fixing tree. Apple stands for any cultivar that's different from the pear cultivar. Apple and pear can change varieties. They don't have to be apple or pear. They could be, for example, they could be peach and then they could be apple. They could be plum, they could be pear, they could be almond, apricot, all kinds of things. It just signifies two different trees that are of different cultivars, because if you have multiple cultivars right next to each other, all it requires is one pest to wipe out all of them. There's also a high amount of resilience in a design like this. These trees were abandoned for 4 years and they survived. For the most part, I mean, there were some fruit tree varieties that did not survive, but the nitrogen fixers, the overstory that protects all the other trees, absolutely thrived. All that overstory, except for the massive trees in the back, all that overstory are nitrogen fixers that we planted about 5 to 6 years ago. I'm not entirely sure now. It's all blending together anymore. So you get the water harvesting capabilities, you get the fruit tree aspect, which feeds you, yourself, and your animals. For example, hold on, just to prove a doggone point, so obviously any of the bad fruit that hits the ground, you can just let your animals eat as they graze in between the swales. Also, as you're picking them, if you come across any bad fruit, like some of these pears aren't necessarily in the best of shape, I'm gonna go throw these to the pigs. This is growing on a swale that they will eventually graze over, but I'm just kind of skipping ahead so I can give my piggies some pears. There's also some more pear trees over on the end. There's some peach trees, the ones that didn't survive are laying on the ground, or they didn't, get harvested, or they were bad. They're laying on the ground. The peach pits, the animals can go ahead, or the pigs in particular, can go ahead and graze on. So the fruit trees are feeding yourself and your pigs. Also, when you graze your animals in between your swales like this, every time there's a rain event with enough water to create runoff, it's washing the manure from the animals into the ditch of the swale, where you should be putting like carbon mulch and stuff like that into the ditch of your swale so it can decompose. I don't know why I said that funny. So it can decompose and feed the microorganisms for your swale. That's going to feed your animals, it's going to feed yourself, and your animals are going to feed the swale, that's going to feed the animals and feed yourself. It's a cycle. You have a closed loop, almost closed loop system, depending on what varieties of animals you're breeding or the varieties of animals that you're grazing out here. It's almost a closed loop system. It provides protection for your animals. You're getting the animal harvest if you're into that. If you're a vegetarian, then you can do chicken eggs. You could graze chickens in between these swales. They could also benefit from some of the varieties. You could also do a dairy cow in between these and do milk. But if you're into meat, you could do cows in between here. And you also don't have to stick to just one animal variety. You could do cows again. You could do sheep. You could do your chickens. You could do your pigs. Do a little rotation through there, so that way you can maximize the different varieties of meat that you're able to raise out on this property. This is the most efficient form, or this is the most efficient use of a piece of property that I know of. The only thing that can make it maybe slightly more efficient is adding some water features like a pond or something like that, but even then you're taking away potential pasture, potential grazing opportunity. Hopefully this video was helpful. Hopefully this kind of gave you a new perspective on permaculture, on silvopasture and how it can apply to your landscape. This is zone 8A, Texas. This pattern, maybe not the species, but this pattern can be replicated in most places, provided that the land isn't too steep for swales or anything like that, and it's not too steep for grazing and stuff like that. But if you need a consultation, hit up the link down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you.